today to talk about in terms of our next webinar in collaboration with ISEF, and we're really looking forward to this session, especially my colleague Sham, who's here today, or Shamim. I call him Sham, but Shamim Ghani here as well today, but I'll come into introductions later on. So thank you very much for joining here today, and good morning to Brendan there as well. A very good morning to Brendan. I know he's got up very early today, so a big thank you to Brendan. So thank you for joining here today. Just 10 a.m. UK time here. Like I said, nice sunny day here today, and a good time to start the day from our side with a great topic to talk about for our SAMS Global webinar series. So again, just to reiterate, a very warm welcome. My name is David Cliff. Thank you very much for joining and taking the time today. I appreciate it, especially in the industry we work in. This is very much the crunch time for recruitment, whether you're running events, attending events, traveling, doing your day-to-day operational recruitment. Big appreciation for taking time out, essentially. So this session forms part of the SAMS Global webinar series for 2026, basically a series designed to provide practical insights and support for international recruitment. If you please reach out on arrival, that would be really great. We'd really appreciate it. Just so, thank you very much. Thank you. So yeah, basically this is a webinar series designed to provide practical insight and support for international student recruitment agencies and university partners. Today's session builds on operational themes explored in early webinars this year, focusing specifically on the growing complexity of managing sub-agent networks and, more important, the visibility and consistency and coordination across that recruitment activity. Before we get into the framing of this topic, just as I've just mentioned there to one of our colleagues there, please mute yourself when you enter, just to help with the flow and potential interruption of communication in today's session. The chat is open. Please feel free to post questions there later on. Our session is quite unique here today. We do normally have a colleague from ISEF and a colleague from the UK university sector. But because I've brought in an in-house colleague from SAMS Global today, we're going to aim to answer any questions posted in the chat towards the end of the session, because as you can appreciate, myself and my colleague Sham will be obviously hosting and delivering the discussion, but also manning the chat as well. So please, we will answer those questions, but they will be later on towards the end of the session, where we'll leave probably 10-15 minutes to answer them later on. The session is recorded, which is great. So if you need to duck out, or for those people who are not here right now and busy, you can catch up later on to watch this video at your discretion. So let's get into framing the topic. So as I said before, today's session is titled Streamlining Sub-Agent Management. Now, the reason why this topic matters and why we've chosen to focus on it, because many agencies today are operating across increasingly large and complex recruitment networks, managing multiple sub-agents, counsellors, referrals, offices, communication channels across different regions and markets for some. And while these networks create significant opportunities for growth, they can also introduce operational complexity, fragmented communication, potential reduced visibility across recruitment activity, and more. So today's session explores how agencies can strengthen coordination, improve oversight, and build more consistent operational processes without creating unnecessary complexity. So moving on to our extra special panel today. I think today definitely we're going to start with our extra special guest from Brazil, I believe calling in from today. So I'll let him introduce himself today, but a huge thank you to Brendan McGurty for joining here today from ISEF, especially because of the time difference as well. So Brendan, a very warm good morning to you as well. So if you don't mind introducing yourself, and thank you for being here.
Sure. Thank you, David. Hi, David. Hi, Sham. Firstly, thank you to everyone at SAMS for inviting me. I'm very excited for this conversation. It's a subject that obviously ISEF cares dearly about. Myself, I've been in the industry for 20 years. I've always been based out here in Brazil over those 20 years in various roles in education fairs, but then also at ISEF. I was 12 years managing an agent network out here for an Irish university as well. So it's a subject that I care dearly about and am passionate about. So yeah, in the prep with Sham last week, it was fascinating to learn more about this, and hopefully I can contribute a few things from my experience. But thank you again for inviting me.
You're very welcome. No, thank you, more. Thank you for joining us here today, Brendan, and for all that great experience and knowledge. And it's going to be a great chat here today. So, and secondly, I'm going to interesting guest here today. Not only a colleague from previous roles I've had in the sector, but my colleague now for SAMS Global. A very warm welcome to Shamim or Sham Ghani, if you don't mind introducing yourself. Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed, David. First thing I want to say, I live next door to a farm, and surprisingly, the farmer has got his tractor out in the farm today. So if there's any noise, please forgive me. Listen, thanks very much, David. And I want everybody to kind of look at my role today in this webinar, not necessarily as somebody who works for SAMS Global, but the fact that I've spent 20 years plus working for British and Australian universities, and also a Canadian college as well. Managing agent networks and looking at the whole idea, if you like, of sub-agents. And I'll say this, that, for me, it's evolved. When I started in this industry, sub-agents were a very different thing to what they are today. But just for everybody's sake, I was, for 5 years, I was head of international projects recently at the University of Huddersfield, but also I was associate director of recruitment at what is now Lancashire University. That was just prior to me joining SAMS. So again, I've worked across almost all markets. I was saying to Brendan last week, South America is the one market that I've not worked in. But other than that, pretty much every other market across the globe, I've been fortunate enough to work in and work very closely with agents.
Thanks, Sham. Perfect. Yeah, as everybody can see here and listen, great experience across the board. And I might not have as much experience as the gentleman on the panel today, but just as me, as a quick introduction, I'm the business development manager for SAMS Global, where I help look after our SAMS CRM platform, which is designed to support agencies in managing their student applications and operational structure. Before SAMS, I worked with Sham for quite a few number of years, about 7-8 years at the University of Huddersfield, where I was an international student recruitment officer, working mostly in Africa and Middle East, building partnerships, supporting those partnerships, general student recruitments as well. Prior to that as well, I worked for about 7-8 years as well into international teaching, places like Japan, Taiwan, and areas like Manchester and Liverpool in the UK as well. So I've always had the student support and student journey and consultation at the heart of what I do, even going into the work I'm doing now as well. So let's get started. I've got one eye on the clock. We're already nearly 10 minutes in, so we've got a lot to cover today. And I'm sure people who are watching here today would like to ask some personal questions later on. So let's get straight into it. So question one. And we'll post these questions in the chat as well. I'll pin them once I've asked the panel, so you guys know exactly what we're referring to here today. So Sham, I'm going to go to you first on this one, and then straight over to Brendan. What are the biggest operational challenges agencies, international agencies, face when managing sub-agent networks? Over to you, Sham. Thank you.
Thanks, David. I think there's one word that I would use to describe the challenge, and that word is control. That the lack of control is probably the biggest challenge. And I think I'm saying that from the university's perspective. That when I worked in the university, if I knew that I was working with an agent, and I worked with many who had very large sub-agent networks, my biggest fear with that agency was lack of control. And what I mean by that is that if you think of it from the university's perspective, and I think it is important as agents that all agents should be viewing, their work from the university's perspective, because the university is the contract holder. That from the university's perspective, my student is being counseled by my agent. But when there's a sub-agent network involved, my agent is no longer counseling my student. It's my agent's agent that is counseling the student. So therefore, what are they saying to that student? I'm telling my agent everything I need to tell them about my university, about the process, about how to get here. Are they sharing that in the right way with their agents, i.e. the sub-agents? That fear leads on to that loss of control. So I think that's probably the biggest challenge, that I would say, and it doesn't really matter which market you're in. Whether you're in sub-Saharan Africa, the Middle East, South Asia, Southeast Asia, really makes no difference to me. It's the layering of the information that's going to my student. And that's an important, way of framing it. From a university's perspective, every student that is applying and thinking about going to that university does not belong to the sub-agent, does not belong to the agent. That student belongs to me. And the agent and the sub-agent are my partners in getting that student to my university. So what is being said to that student becomes very, very critical. And the loss of that control makes me nervous when I worked in the university. That's what I'd say to that.
Just on that point, do you think, of all the years of experience you've had, Sham, do you think that sense of control and the whole structure of the sort of sub-agent network, has it become more complex over the years as time's gone by, or has it always been there as a complex network of that service structure?
I think that's a really interesting point. I think, to be honest with you, back when I started international recruitment in the early 2000s, we didn't encourage any agents to talk about sub-agencies. It was a subject that nobody spoke about. In fact, it was very, very disliked. I've personally, terminated contracts on the basis of sub-agent revelations. But I think certainly over the last 10 years, the landscape has changed enormously. And sub-agents are now very much part of the recruitment channel. So I kind of think to myself that, the challenge has always been there, but it's much more obvious now that there is that sub-agent network. And I think the biggest problem in all of this is how the UK government, if we talk in UK terms, and let's not forget, guys, that the UK is talking to the US, they're talking to the Canadians, they're talking to the Australians. So each government may have a different policy, but they are all speaking to one another. And that's an important point that we should all remember. So certainly with the British government at the moment, they're very, very interested in how universities are working with their agents. And therefore the question of sub-agents comes up. So the government at the moment is asking universities to make sure that they have the list of sub-agents that their agents are working with. And that's where the complexities start to emerge, that going forward, how much more is the government going to want to know about sub-agents? This is something that we don't know the answer to at the moment.
No, that's a really good point, Sham, and I'll come back to that actually in a bit. That's a really pertinent point. But Brendan, and thanks, Sham. Brendan, over to you on this point. Just looking, you're based out, in Brazil and the sort of the South American markets there. I believe there isn't so much, in inverted commas, a sub-agent structural model in the markets there, more of a franchise system, if I believe that's right. And if so, is the control of that sort of franchise model exercise, and do you think that actually needs control in this state of time in recruitment?
Sure. When I raised this, the subject of master agents and sub-agents to my partners out here, the key question back was, what's a master agent? It really isn't a model that's been embraced in Latin America, certainly not in Brazil, so perhaps other countries. But I think that's because of just consumer patterns out here that consumers do recognize strong brands. So the bigger agents, the franchise models, or those that may have their own control, but it's the name, it's the brand of that spreads out. And I'm sure there are communications to certain parts of Brazil where there may not be a franchise of the big agents. Obviously, we have the Amazon rainforest out here. We have lots of very sort of sparse, hard to get to parts of the country. So, of course, there may be communication between agents for certain students. There may be more referral as opposed to a sub-agent, but it's nowhere near structured to the complexity that it would be in Southeast Asia and other markets around the world. So, but just to follow on from Sham's point as well, in terms of the one word, for me, the one word would be transparency. We're moving into the era of transparency now globally, not just for the UK, but around in the sort of key markets. Sham mentioned Canada, US as well, Australia. They really are wanting to know exactly who is sending students to the institution. So obviously from the institution side, you are concerned, are they getting the right information? They're getting the accurate information, because there's so many points to cover. There's accommodation, there's academic requirements. There's so many parts that play a role. And the further down the sub-agent that you go, how much of that information is being absorbed and is being recognized? So yeah, there's so many intricacies with it. But as Sham also mentioned, that the sub-agent network is far more important and more recognized these days than before. But it is making sure that that information that's being passed to the student is accurate, and that the educator knows exactly who it is that is promoting their school.
No, thank you, Brendan. Absolutely. I think that Sham's been at all the webinars this year, and I think there's a couple of words. One word in particular we'll come to later, but one he brought up there, sense of transparency. That's almost exclusively been for each webinar, whatever topic we talked about. That's been quite key, especially between that partnership of universities and agents. With just one thing I want to bring up now is, and Sham, this is very much for the UK market, and we always chat about recruitment, and although we're not part of student recruitment anymore per se, but we're certainly in that realm. One thing we often talk about is the new CAS situation in the UK with the agent's name going on there, and we've talked recently about how with that case where the sort of the license of the universities aren't, it could be sort of, be effective here if there are issues going on with the agents and the practice that's happening. Do you think that situation where the agent's name is on the CAS is now in a position where the sub-agents need to have more control from the master agent as well? Do you think that's going to be more of the government's oversight flowing over into sub-agent management as well, with this sort of rise of the name on the CAS for agents?
I think. Sorry. Go on, Brendan. Go on.
I was just saying for sure it is. I think the initial rollout, and we spoke about this last week, Sham, that the individual, we can use the master agent for the time being, but eventually it will get to a place where the sub agent will need to be included in that. So yeah, it's more control. But sorry, Sham, I interrupted you there.
No, it's absolutely fine, Brendan. Absolutely fine. Look, for me, the fact that the agent's name has gone on the CAS now is a seismic shift. If somebody had said that to me 5 years ago, government's going to do, I would have been like, don't be crazy. That's never going to happen. Because right now, what the government's able to do is track the agency for every single student. And in fact, to be fair, in all the years that I've been in recruitment, I didn't even think the government even really understood how we work with agents. So for them to go from, that's certainly my opinion, but for that reality to happen, the question whether the sub-agents, how far is the government going to go? For me, it's a natural consequence that having the agent on the CAS is not going to satisfy them. Because what they're going to realize very, very quickly is that the agent on the CAS may or may not have spoken to the student. And that's what they're interested in. Who's speaking to the student? So if we have, main agent, sub-agent, then another sub-agent, then another sub-agent, they want to get right down to the bottom of which individual is speaking to the student. Will they then ask for the sub-agents to be on the CAS? My money would be on yes, they will. That is coming. Because right now, for them to even ask the universities to have a list of sub-agents, that's a massive step, in that direction. Look, at the end of the day, David, Brendan, my view is there is absolutely nothing wrong with working with sub-agents. This is not something that we should hide away from. This is not something we should, not talk about. What's the problem? If you look at so many different industries around the world, there are resellers who work for resellers. In every single industry that we're thinking about, if you look at the motor industry, car manufacturers are selling cars not themselves directly, but through multitudes of agents and sub-agents. So there's nothing wrong with that. The issue is how that recruitment happens. And that's the worrying part, if you like, because there has to be sector maturity when it comes to working with sub-agents. And in my opinion, that maturity isn't quite there yet. That we are more interested in volume when we're talking about sub-agents. I just want the students to come through, and I don't want to have to do the work. Because for me to do the work means I have to invest a huge amount of money and hire people and all the rest of it. This is a simpler way to do it. I've got a company that's already established. He or she is bearing the cost. You know, I'm happy to share my commission rate so long as I get the volume. If that becomes the only factor or metric governing the relationship between agents and sub-agents, government's going to have a major problem with that.
Absolutely. Yeah, Brendan, if you want to add anything to that before I progress on to another question on that particular point at all. I know you all good there, all good. Just there was a particular word you did bring up, Brendan, there though a minute ago, was that sense of transparency. I think that's a very, very key word, and there's a question on this I do want to just put to yourself, and also Sham after yourself, is how does that limited transparency or visibility across the recruitment activity creating difficulties for agencies and universities, do you think? What are the potential difficulties that could arise if there is a lack of potential transparency on that sub-agent network?
Sure, it's really been the sort of keyword for ISF recently as well. I didn't actually say at the beginning, so my role at ISF, I'm Global IAS Director, so I'm managing and overseeing the day-to-day management of the IAS accreditation. So, and again, when we introduced it, it wasn't a sort of a way to replace existing due diligence. It was a way to enhance it, a way for agencies to show the industry who you are, and that really is the key force behind it, because we need to demonstrate to the industry, because we've seen these restrictions come in from governments, and that is simply because there hasn't been enough transparency. So we need to demonstrate that the sub-agent, that this is their primary focus, or that they're not involved in any other activity that may not be above board. So we just need to make sure that we are able to present and know who it is that is promoting our institutions, and have confidence that they're doing it in the right way, but also that they are operating within the law. So that there are parts of it where, again, that's what IAS provides, is super transparency. There's the 7-step verification process where we look at the digital footprint, ID verification, address verification, all these elements that play a role. So we're giving confidence back to the industry, confidence back to both the sector, but also to these governments, that the information does sort of filter up. There are lobbying organizations that do have genuine influence politically. So it's the more transparency that our industry has, the better for everyone, because these restrictions will be eased eventually, or because these governments recognize the value that international education brings to them, economically, culturally, all sorts of areas. So the more transparency that we're able to provide, the better for everyone. These student mobility channels will open up, and that's what we all want.
Thanks, Brendan. Perfect. Yeah, excellent. And I think you've mentioned some of the fantastic software and tools which ISF have, and we'll touch upon them later as solutions and support mechanisms for the market. Absolutely. Just as my colleague Shams just pointed out, we do have some polls going out. So when they do pop up, please complete them. It'd be really interesting to get your feedback. And the first poll's already gone out. Sham, anything on this particular question in regards to, again, that keyword transparency and visibility, anything that could arise which could be problematic from the stakeholders here, universities, agents, etc.?
I'll give you a quick example to demonstrate how not having visibility creates colossal problems. Okay, when I worked in one of the universities I worked at, I had a student that arrived at the airport, and this student was being interviewed by the immigration officers. And there was a problem that they came across with this student. So the immigration officer called the university, and I had to speak to the immigration officer on the phone live while they've got the student in front of them. The question the immigration officer asked that student, who was your agent? And they gave an answer. And when the immigration officer said that to me, I said, oh, no, that's not one of our agents, because they weren't one of our agents. I was the one managing all our contracts. And I knew that I've never heard of this agency before. That then creates in the mind of that immigration officer the lack of transparency. So it's almost like the university doesn't know what they're doing, because you're telling me that this is not one of your agents. In fact, the student has an offer letter from your university. If that's not your agent, how did they get the offer letter? And it's only through further investigation, and I was sweating, trying to get rid of this guy, that I discovered, oh my God, because I had another colleague contact the agent very, very, as an emergency call. And it turned out that that's one of their sub-agents. So when we talk about transparency, there are real consequences of not being transparent. If I knew exactly who my sub-agents were, that immigration officer calls me and says, oh, they came through agency X. I'm like, yeah, I know, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, because they are a sub-agent contracted to one of our master agents. Perfectly fine. But not knowing that, I'm trying to argue, I don't know what you're talking about. This is not one of our students. Now we go into the realm of, did the student actually have a fake offer letter? I mean, the rabbit hole starts to then go deeper and deeper and deeper. I mean, it's just stupid then. And it was all because of the lack of transparency. And it's a dramatic example, but I hope it really demonstrates what happens when you don't have transparency, in this sort of a working model.
Thanks, Sham. I think that's a perfect example. I think, this is the reality, isn't it? If we don't have full clarity of what's going on, this is the potential, sort of outcome. I think just on that point there, with these potential inconsistencies, how can we deal with this then if these inconsistencies or lack of clarity are not centralized? What approaches can we take to centralize it, or should there be more centralization, Sham, in this case, and oversight?
I think, look, I've been, lucky enough to be involved in, senior levels at universities, but also I was on the executive board of the British University International Liaison Association. So, at a strategic level, there is a lot of discussion around how do we mitigate these kind of situations. Nobody in the international recruitment sector, certainly in the UK, and my understanding in other markets as well, is interested in having no students, or is interested in making life difficult for their agents. Nobody wants that. But they need to have a model, a system in place that satisfies the government, but also ensures good recruitment of students and reduces the complexities that are involved when you've got a long chain in nurturing that student. That's all I'd say to that, really, to be honest with you, that that it's about us as a sector catching up with how we want to work. And that needs to be something that's actually not just the universities telling the agents how that work needs to happen, but it needs to come as a collaborative approach. And that's why people like ISEF are invaluable for this kind of collaboration, that they're working with universities and with agents, but they have an independent voice. So I think organizations like ISEF are really crucial to this kind of conversation.
Perfect.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. No, absolutely, Sham. Thank you so much. And so, Brendan, I've got a question to you, just leading on from there. How can, wherever much market that would be, how can agencies aim to improve that idea of oversight without creating unnecessary complexity or too much complexity for staff and for partners?
Can I go with that first, Brendan?
Yeah, go.
You go for it, Sham. Yeah,
Sorry, mate. Can I just go with that? Because look, and because I've got a certain thread in my head going on right now. Look, and Brendan, hopefully you will mirror this as well, that as a university member of staff, we are under, or when I was working as a university member of staff, there was an awful lot of paperwork and policy procedure that we needed to share with our agents, and the agents needed to get on board. And we had to do due diligence work before signing up an agent. There's a lot of stuff that went on in the background. It wasn't just a case of I meet an agent in a country, or an agent randomly contacts me on email and I say, great, yeah, I'm going to sign them up. It doesn't work like that. There's a lot of stuff in the background that you have to do. And what's interesting right now is that the British universities are having to do a lot more than what we used to do in terms of that paperwork. And this is the key word, paperwork. At a recent event in London, I got asked by 5 different agents, look, how do we survive the current, regulatory kind of nightmare that's going on. You know, government wanting this, universities wanting that. And I said, you know what, guys, you need to embrace paperwork. You know, agencies that I've met across so many markets around the world are focused, very, very focused on just getting the student, and everything else seems to be just, you know, a pain. I just want to get my student and get them an offer and get them a visa and get them to you. I think what needs to change amongst agents and sub-agents is process, paperwork, procedure. If these three things are actually embraced, then life gets easier for everybody. Because what the university wants to see is a proper process of sub-agent recruitment. They want to see some policies that the agency has of how they're governing their sub-agency network, and they want to see the actual paperwork. It's not good enough just to say that, oh, I'm good, I know how I'm managing my sub-agents. Prove it to me. Show me what you have. And I think unless and until the sector gets that right as an agency block, I think there's always going to be room for universities to say, the agents are the bad actors in what's going on here. And I hate that phrase. I have always been, and I continue to be, pro-agency. I like the idea of working with agents. I've had some fantastic relationships over the last 25 years with agents that I still have today, and I'm not a recruiter. But the fact of the matter is, unless and until the agency network starts to think about policies, procedures, and paperwork, and provability. When I say paperwork, I don't mean physical paper. I mean, you know, the ability to prove what you're doing. Then that's what needs to happen. Other than that, you know, the problem's going to deepen. Sorry, Brandon, go on. Over to you.
Thanks, Sean.
Your point there about paperwork reminded me of my sort of airport panic story. So I was there was a student arriving from Brazil, from a franchise of a very big, the biggest agency in Brazil, and we were told by the agent that the student is being held at Heathrow. And we always said, with Ireland, we always advise them, don't go through Heathrow, don't go through UK, try and find a connection Europe. It's just more complicated. But they went by Heathrow and were detained. The reason was the agent thought that we hadn't done our bit. And what happened was the agent, the franchisee, had sent them the offer letter as opposed to the letter of acceptance. So obviously the offer letter is not a document to prove that they've been accepted on their courses, and anyone can get an offer letter. So there was, I was calling. They were being detained in a centre near Heathrow. I'm from nearby Heathrow, so I was calling all day, and then just managed to get through at the last minute before the student was deported back to Brazil, to explain that it was an admin error, that the document they presented was inaccurate, but the student is registered or will be registered. Got the document to them using this incredibly long email with numbers and uppercase, lowercase, and eventually sorted out. But it's that accuracy, these little details that may seem little, they are so important in this process. So just I'm getting back to the original point. Yeah, we all want these students as a recruiter. We of course all want students. I know we're competing with so many different other institutions as well. So we want to make it as easy as possible. But we also, as you said, need to have a level of control, a level of ability to ensure that all these details are being filtered through accurately. So yeah, and it's about use like this era of technology. Now there's so many tools available where it makes it easier for master agents, for sub agents to disseminate the school data and for the master agent to manage and see who is promoting which institutions as well. So I think that is what we need to move on to, moving away from the era of high volume, high commission, to a much more sustainable industry where the attention has to be on the student. We have to move away from this sort of cattle farming, shipping them over on volume. That era is behind us, and it was great. We all enjoyed it, but I think we do need to really focus now on the person, the most important person in all this, and that is the student, making sure that they're getting the pastoral care that they should be through this whole process. So yeah, I think for the key is for agents, sub-agents, masters. I'm like you. I some of my best friends are agents. Been to their weddings, know their families. It's a model that I'm very much a B2B person. I didn't enjoy attending student fairs. I was much more happy mixing with my agent network and ensuring that they're well prepared and well paid for the work they put in. But I think, yeah, the era of high volume is behind us, and we just need to make sure that the student is now the center of attention for all this.
Here, absolutely, Brendan. Yeah, absolutely. It always comes back to that, the student end of the day, isn't it? We want to make sure they get that best service quality for sure. We just picked out, we're going to, and thank you so much for some of the points you've made in the chat, guys, from the audience today. Some great questions, and we'll do our best to spend a good 10 minutes towards the end to cover them. One we just want to pick out right now is from Elsona. I hope you're well today. Thanks for joining the session today, wherever you're calling from. I can see that on the camera, it's waiting to see in the corner. So I'll just pose this question to the panel. I work as a sub-agent for SI UK, if you all know who they are, and I handle the entire process directly with the students. However, I was informed that I am not allowed to mention my agency to universities as a sub-agent of SI UK. I feel this is a bit unfair, as we do a significant amount of the work and support for the students, but cannot openly present our role to the university. Good point there. Thank you, Sham. Brendan, anything you want to just mention to Elson on that?
Well, look, at the end of the day, obviously, you know, I know the guys at SI UK really well. So it's, you know, we just need to be very careful that this platform is not about discussing them or their policies or procedures. What I will say, though, is that I totally agree that you know, sub-agents do an awful lot of work. You know, they are the ones on the front line. They're sourcing the students, they're nurturing and really convincing that student to study at destination X or Y, you know, in whichever country they're in. My understanding, and if I was still working at the universities, what I was encouraging then, but certainly would be doing now, you know, my wife currently works at a university, and I know that that's what they're doing, is really encouraging agents to share their sub-agency network. Doesn't matter which agency you are, whether you're one of the biggest or whether you're one of the smallest. It really doesn't matter. That if you are working with sub-agents, the universities are encouraging all of their agents to have that list. Now, why? This is it's not just because for the fun of it. If the universities have a UK VI audit, so this is where people from the UK VI, the UK, you know, Visa and Immigration Service, from the Home Office, they come to the university, spend 2 or 3 days in the university, asking very, very probing questions. Now, I know that because I have undergone UK VI audits in the past. Sorry, guys, I don't know why my camera keeps freezing, but, you know, just please excuse that. In those meetings, you can have some really uncomfortable conversations where they're asking for detail after detail after detail, and they're going further down, you know, for a specific student or a specific situation. In that situation, if the UK VI know that agency X has a sub-agent, but I don't know that, then I am in trouble. Okay, and they won't tell me. They won't tell me. So, Elsona, your question, right? Nobody's going to tell the university, oh, I know that this organization, this agency has Elsona as a sub-agent. They're not going to tell them that. They're simply going to ask that question. That, oh, so this student came through this agency. Who actually spoke to that student? In fact, can we go and talk to the student? And the student says, oh, the person I spoke to was Elsona. And they're like, well, who's Elsona? I don't know who Elsona is. You know, and that's where the problem then becomes, potentially could become catastrophic for the university. So each university is, you know, almost paranoid. And look, I am going to mention something that we at SAMS Global, we provide tech solutions for universities, okay? And one of our products, which is called SAMS Manage, actually is to help universities manage their agent networks. And in that SAMS Manage product, the universities who helped design it wanted a section for sub-agents. They wanted a section so that the university can invite all of their agents to go in and populate the sub-agency network. So if that was, you know, a clear indication that the universities want to see the sub-agent network, it's there. Now, I don't know this particular situation, and like I said, I respect and I have a lot of time for the SI UK guys. I've worked with them for years, so I don't know the reality of that. Also, I'm sorry I can't speak to you specifically about that. But what I would say is that there is definitely an urgency within the university to have lists of sub-agents that agencies are working with. 100%. There's no running away from that. Brendan, over to you.
Just I fully back that. And yeah, as you said, the AQF coming in as well, where the universities, and this isn't just UK as well. This is other Australia are going down this route as well, where universities may need to even publish their agent lists. And it was really strange when I was managing my agent network. I was very protective of them. I didn't want my competitor institutions to know who was sending me students, but we're beyond that now. I think we have to be more, as we said, transparent and know who is representing us, ensuring that they get the right information. But yeah, no, fully back that, and yeah, that's well added.
Cheers, guys. Thank you very much. I want to get a few more last questions in before we go to any sort of questions from the audience today. We know we've had one, but I do want to throw in a few more questions. So over to you guys again on this one. So this is an important one. How do structured, basically I work a lot with workflows for our current CRM system, which we use for SAMS Global. But this question is specifically about how to support agencies in this particular realm of discussion. And that is, how do structured workflows help agencies scale more effectively across multiple regions? So, you know, if you are working in multiple markets, cities, regions, etc., how can a structured workflow help agencies scale more effectively, especially in line with this discussion here today in terms of being transparent, clear communication, and adhering to best practice in that sense? Sham and Brendan, over to you both. Thank you.
I'll let Brendan go first on this one. Brendan, over to you.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
But it is a huge point, and I think both SAMS and ISEF are looking really closely at this in terms of trying to help the industry with these challenges. From an ISEF side, we have a number of products because we've sort of traditionally been seen as an education events company, and obviously the events are an important part because that physical sort of meeting is and these relationships that we built, it's what the industry is built on. But we are providing services to agents and to institutions. We have the Train Your Agents platform where institutions they would upload their training. We would obviously help them enhance it and modernize it. A lot of the time it's just a PDF. I remember my old PDF that I used to roll out for agent training, but it's just a way for that to then be distributed to their agents and sub-agents, so that, and it's trackable. You can see exactly who and which agency, and the agency themselves can see, or the master agent, which of their sub-agents has taken which training for which institution. So that, I think these tools are fundamental to ensuring that we do manage this, and I think that the institutions that are embracing these services and these products are the ones that will do the best, the ones that will be able to manage at scale, to have confidence that their agent network, their sub-agent network has the sort of the bare minimum, has the baseline of information necessary to promote the institution in the correct way. And I believe, Sam, you mentioned, Sham, that you have a CRM which the agent can use to manage their network as well.
Thanks, Brendan. Absolutely. Yeah, and even on that point, Brendan, you know, there are lots of great CRMs on the market, and I'm picking out SAMS CRM because also I work closely with it. But when you have a system like that, you're able to have overview of not just your B2C network, but there are modules within that system like SAMS CRM where it's a sub-agent management system where it gives you centralized oversight of your B2B, who those partners are, where the students have come from, etc., etc. And with the ability to have that set up, you are in a great position then to provide the sense of transparency, oversight, and if your partner institution does require key information about where particular students come from, it's a few clicks of a button, you know where they've come from and what is that streamline coming through for that particular student support as well. Sham, on this particular point, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think, look, guys, you know, in a digital age, it's really, it's easy to scale into multiple regions. You know, back in the day when I started, you know, recruiting, we physically, like, I used to spend a lot of time in West Africa, particularly in Nigeria, and we used to physically have to go really long distances to basically meet students, right? I was going from Lagos down to Benin City, you know, to Warri, to Port Harcourt, you know, to, you know, all far-flung places up in the north. In today's reality, with the digital footprint, it's easy to connect with people across, you know, multiple regions, and you start having these networks that eventually form into sub-agents that are feeding you students and that are feeding you, you know, more revenue, if you like. I think structured workflows, if people on this call did one thing over the next week, the thing that I would suggest that they do is contact certainly if you're a master agent, if you hold a contract, speak to your institution about how they manage you. Okay, I've spent an awful lot of time in my career managing agents, issuing contracts, making sure we've got this policy, that policy, you know, doing you know, agency reviews once a year, twice a year, looking at their pipeline, managing that pipeline. If you have workflows as a master agent that mirror your university's workflow to you, you use that workflow to manage your sub-agents, all of a sudden, the problem starts to become a lot smaller. And you can scale. You can, rather than just using WhatsApp to make an agreement. I met some guy, you know, on a I don't know, barbecue, and he happens to live 200 miles away from me. I happen to tell him that, oh, you know, look, I'm into student recruitment. And he says, oh, right, great. I can get you some students. Oh, okay, now you become my sub-agent. That is the problem. Don't do that, okay? If you're going to sign up, treat your own business more seriously than that. That if I'm going to sign up a sub-agent, there has to be a concrete workflow that everybody needs to go through and then sign that person up. That then becomes a solid relationship that you can rely on, you can lean on, and you can prove to your university, I'm not doing anything, you know, stupid or ridiculous. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. Yeah, cheers, Sham. And just to dovetail that, really, I know we've got another poll going live now, but just before we go to any questions from the audience, and for you, Brendan and Sham, is just, you've already given some great sage advice on how to proceed after this session, but any other practical insights or guidance moving forward in terms of that ability to have a greater control of the sub-agent network, digitizing more, having more sense of transparency, quality control over that communication, etc. Any more tips you could potentially provide? Brendan, I know you've already mentioned some of the great work ISEF's doing. Anything else the agents on the call here today can do moving forward? Thank you.
Sure, I think, yeah, this is it. It's using companies like ISEF, we have the agency accreditation, and again, that isn't a sort of ISEF trying to police the industry. No, it is to provide agencies with visibility. Like, you shouldn't be hiding who you are. Show the world. So the accreditation and the data that we collect, and we refresh every 12 months as well, it's fundamental. It just provides reassurance to educators around the world. And as we said, it should, these measures all play a role in opening up student mobility flows. So we need to show the world that our industry isn't the problem, that we are acting, that we are doing all we can. We're coming together to really show the world that who we are, and ensuring that the student that's making that trip, the biggest decision of their life up until that point, that they're getting everything that they need. And so utilize as many companies as you can, all of these services that are available to you to help your business, but also to help the industry. I think that's the key. We're going through some challenging times with sort of global geopolitical issues. So our industry does need to come together, and I think that's the key message, is to be as transparent as possible, and together we are able to push through these times to ensure that everyone has this industry receives the best possible outcomes.
Thanks, Brendan. Absolutely perfect. Superb. Sham, any final word on this before we move over to the audience?
What I do add to transparency is trust. Okay, I think there seems to be a lot of or some lack of trust between agents and sub-agents. And I say that back in the day, years ago, I worked as an agent myself, and we had a sub-agency, a very small sub-agency network. But one of the things that the sub-agent used to say to us all the time is that we, as the master agent, we're not allowed to talk to their students because there was mistrust that somehow I'm going to steal the students from the sub-agent. Now, all of this, creates these little barriers and creates this little silo, mentality, which then leads to the lack of transparency, etc., etc. At the root of all of these things is the lack of process and procedure and documentation. If I've got a legal document between myself and my sub-agent, a contract that says that I am not allowed to steal your student, then surely there's got to be some, and I appreciate that in many countries, those contracts might not mean as much as they do here in the UK, but you've got to start somewhere. You've got to start somewhere to help build that trust so that you can work in a more transparent way. And I think without that, there's always going to be this fracture and this nervousness and hiding of things between sub-agents, agents, and universities. And ultimately, that's not good for anybody.
Thanks, Sham. Perfect. I think just going from that point of trust and that key word there. By the way, Lars, I know you're on the call here. Just clarify your question you posted earlier on in the chat again, and I'll post that question to the panelists. Ahmed Farah, thank you very much for joining the session here today. And just on that sense of trust and university and agent partnership relations, Sham and Brendan, it's a good question here. And Sham, we talked about this recently, actually, from a slightly different pivoted approach. But after working as a sub-agent, I've recently established our own UK agency, registered agency. Congratulations. Despite holding ICEF accreditation and British Council training, we are facing challenges in securing agreements with universities due to the requirement for UK references. Could you advise on how we might address this? Again, Sham, we chatted about this recently, didn't we, and what could be potentially the best practice and approach in this. But I appreciate universities are closing a lot of doors in terms of partnerships, and they are streamlining potential agent networks and more management of those networks. Any advice to our colleague on the call here today with that question?
Yeah, can I say something? Ahmed, thank you for that question. Look, there should be no. It almost feels like to me that it's a two-tier system, that if I'm a sub-agent, then I'm not as good because I don't hold that contract. Don't feel like that. Be proud that I'm doing my business, okay? And the master agent, okay, they've got the contract, it's not the end of the world. So long as you're happy with the commission rates that you're getting and you're getting it on time. What I would say to master agents is you guys really do need to look after your sub-agents, because if you lose those sub-agents, then you lose volume. But with the question of the universities not wanting to sign up new agents, that very much depends on several factors. Number one, which market are you based in? That's going to determine whether or not a university signs you up. Given the current state of play in the UK, most universities are not interested in signing up new agents. In fact, they are getting rid of agents. So agencies that held contracts are being told, unfortunately, that their contracts are being cancelled because the performance hasn't been right, whether that's volume or whether that's the integrity of the students or whatever it might be. So don't be disheartened and feel like, oh my God, why is this such a big hassle that I can't seem to get direct contracts. What I would do is I would really clarify and shore up my own relationship with the master agent, and I would make sure that the master agent is visibly telling the university who I am, okay, and have a little bit more transparency there. In fact, what I would do as a sub-agent, I would ask my master agent, can you invite and talk to my students directly? And you can be in the room, no problem, and I'm happy to sign an agreement to say that, I want you to sign an agreement to say that you're not going to steal my students. Because I used to do that. Back in the day, when I worked for the Australians, I was going into markets that were entirely B2B. And we as a university were going and speaking to the sub-agents as much as we were talking to the agents, and speaking to the sub-agent students. But that entire chain was governed by contracts and policies and procedures. So it is possible. But, you know, I mean, that's all I'll say to that. I mean, at the end of the day, the university, you know, is up to its own policies and procedures to decide whether or not they're going to sign up new agents. But this would be my advice.
Thanks, Sean.
Well, I just very briefly add there as well. I'm great to hear that the person posing the question has IS accreditation, and we do receive this feedback a lot. We're like, well, I've got my accreditation, but institutions are still asking for references, and we have many institutions that have really embraced IS and do use it as part of their due diligence, but we do not force that. We do not say that the institution must use IS, and I think as the accreditation grows, that more and more institutions will adopt it at least part of their due diligence. So if they were asking for 4 references before, they know that we are collecting those 4 references, so maybe they'll ask for 2. But again, we have no control over that. We can't enforce institutions to change their onboarding policies. But as I said, the importance of IS is the transparency that it provides. You're showing the industry who you are. And in time, I would hope that more institutions adopt it at some level in their own due diligence policy. But I wish you the very best in getting those agreements with UK universities.
Thanks, Brendan. Yeah, absolutely. And the great work you guys do as agencies, just carry on what you're doing, but at the same time, keep with what we've sort of provided as guidance today, you know, adopt that sense of structured workflow, you know, have that transparency on your side as well, have great metrics of the great work you're doing with conversion and compliance, etc. And that will, you know, provide great evidence later on when you are coming to discussions with your master agent or potential contractual approaches to universities as well. That potentially could, you know, become really sort of important later on in those discussions. There's some really good questions or sort of comments here. Thank you, Hamid, with your post here about oversight. Some really good points you've made there in the back there in terms of the workflow and sort of that area of complexity. Thank you very much for that. Again, Elijah, I know you posted a question before. Just please just clarify that point. I don't know if you can see that, Sham. It was a bit earlier on in the chat by Elijah about it was based in Nigeria. I mean, can our client or candidate be considered due to our involvement in their application? I don't know if you can see that one near the top. I'm not 100% sure on that, but Elijah, if you just want to clarify.
Yeah, I've just seen it. If I've understood that question correctly, you know, you definitely will need to have, universities will want to see a application chain, okay, that the application originated from where. That's something that I don't think agencies are going to be able to hide away from for much longer. In the past, it only originated from the master agent. I think that's going to start to kind of go away. That there's going to have to be a situation where did that application originate from? And I know, David, that in the CRM system that you work with very closely with, you know, with agents, that CRM system actually does tag the student to a particular sub-agent as it comes up the channels. I think you know, when you start looking at some of the big aggregators that we have around the world, I'm not going to name any of them, but you know, where there are huge sub-agency networks that these master agents have, they are probably the ones that are going to have to drive that change in terms of universities asking them, where did this application originate from? You know, who was the individual company? And that could be 1 layer, 2, 3, 4 layers down. It doesn't really matter. So long as that transparency is there, that's fine. You know, and I really hope that if not anything else from this webinar, people are picking up that being a sub-agent is perfectly legitimate and perfectly fine, so long as your relationship with your master agent is governed properly. If it's not governed properly, then you've got a problem. You know, so that's something that if it's been, you know, if your master agent isn't offering that governance, drive it. You know, from you force your master agent to have those levels of governance, because if that doesn't exist, then that is going to be a problem in the future, definitely.
Thanks, Sham. Any final point on that, Brendan? I know we are approaching that hour mark now, but anything you'd like to add there at all? Thank you.
No, I'm from my side, fully back what Sham said, yeah.
Super duper. Elsona, I know you've just posted, we'll just take your comment as the last message here. Thanks for being active on the chat there. We'll just have this as a closing point, and then I'll just close up the session. I was about to submit 4 students to Sunderland University, UK University, but because I was working through a big agency as a sub-agent, I was told to submit the applications through them instead. At the same time, I was informed that I don't meet the requirements for direct partnership with the university. Yeah, interesting dynamic there. As a new agency, it feels difficult to build direct relationships, even when we are already bringing genuine students. I wholeheartedly, respect that. Sham, I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, David, can I just say, Elsona, this is definitely not personal. Okay, this is not personal, so don't take it personally.
Yeah.
This is where universities are having to prove to the UKVI how they are managing their agents. And I tell you this, having been in those shoes, having done that job at a senior level in universities, I can tell you this, that the UKVI is suggesting to universities that they should have 150, 160 agents in their network. There are universities out there with 400, 500 agents on their network. Those universities are beginning to think, right, I need to reduce, let alone add. I need to get rid of the ones that I've got. Not because I don't like them, not because they're not good enough, but because the government is now going to start questioning me about how I manage those agents. And I'm talking at a micro level where I might not be able to prove how I'm managing those agents. And maybe I haven't yet embraced the ISEF tools, which I probably should, because that would help me actually manage my agent network better. So please, please, please don't take it personally. Okay, I really would say that it's a situation that we're in at the moment. Don't scratch your head thinking, okay, what am I doing wrong? What am I doing wrong? You probably are doing nothing wrong. But actually, the reality is that the universities aren't signing up agents at the moment. My advice to you is there are lots of master agents out there who are hungry for sub-agents. So choose your master agents carefully. Don't just sign up to the next guy. Don't just look at what rate of commission is the best rate of commission. I wouldn't do that. I would look to see what support my master agent can offer me. That would be the biggest criteria. Because eventually I want to grow my business, whether I've got direct contracts or not. I want to make more money. I want to be a bigger agency in my area. I want to basically, be able to go and, kind of proudly say, yeah, this is what I've built. So whether you're a master agent or not, really that shouldn't be the issue. The issue is the relationship that you've got with your master agent. If that's a poor relationship, then you are going to be insignificant in that process. If it's a strong relationship, then you can proudly say, yes, I work with company X, and I'm enjoying it. I hope that makes some sense.
Yeah, thanks, Sham. Yeah, and absolutely, it's not personal at all, is it? It's just the state of how things are right now. And with great universities like London University, like you say, it's just how the nature of the beast is right now in the market and how they're just managing the agent network. But yeah, just carry on the great work you are doing. And that chain of, sort of great work you're providing to your master agent as well. Look, we are just over an hour's time here. We could carry on this chat for much longer, I'm sure, but I appreciate everybody's got to go back to work and there's plenty going on. And plus, Brendan has kindly sort of got up early for this session here today. Any final words, Brendan or Sham, before we close up the shop today?
Just thank you for inviting me, and just to follow on that point as well. With I know it's tough for many agents when they're new, and that's the thing with ISEF, that try and come to an ISEF event. If you're new, we welcome new, large, small. We don't discriminate in terms of. I think that personal connection, that presence, when you meet institutions face to face or visit them even, that makes a huge difference when getting those agreements started and you're starting the new business. And we know it's a struggle. So, but yeah, keep fighting on. And but yeah, thank you for inviting me. It's been a really, really interesting conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Brendan. Just on that point, I've been to ISEF events before and they're brilliant, and they are, you're there to develop business development, but it's great because you get to network, as a B2B factor, you get to hear experiences of other agents and advice they can pass on, and likewise as well. So it's a really good chance to engage with other agents in the field as well and share your experiences. But yeah, thank you, Brendan. Brilliant. Sham, final word before we close up?
Just thanks, David, for letting me come to the shop front. I'm normally behind the scenes somewhere, in my pajamas. Today, I've really enjoyed the discussion. Thank you very much for having me on the panel.
No, thank you very much, Sham, and thank you for all the sort of, great experience and sort of insight you provided. And of course, the great questions here today. This is obviously going to be a topic I think will continue on into the future for a long time of discussion. It certainly won't be going away, and it's one which we do greatly enjoy talking about and supporting as well. But yeah, just a big thank you to Brendan and Sham, and especially Brendan. I know you got very early today where you're based today, so a huge thank you and sharing your insight and experience. Today's session, we're all done now. We hope you've enjoyed this session on sub-agent management and streamlining it and supporting it, and all the great words we've used today: communication, centralization, etc. We have recorded this session. We will be posting it out to you in the next day or two as a link to watch it on our YouTube channel, so please keep an eye out and you can share it amongst your colleagues as well. We are aiming to do another session next month or so as well. Our next topic hopefully is going to be focusing on improving operational communication in international recruitment, so we're going to keep continuing those important and pertinent discussion points moving on into the future. But for now, thank you very much. Stay cool if it's hot in your country. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Good luck with your recruitments for the next intake September, and it's been a real pleasure sharing this experience with you today. Have a great day, and we'll see you all soon. Thanks everybody. Bye for now. Bye-bye.